Stop making my father's house a place of business! No!
Needless to say,
something's about to break. If you thought episode 1 of The Chosen season 5 was intense with Jesus quietly preparing his whip, the Watcher lurking in the shadows, and Judas beginning to question everything, then episode 2 is where the pressure finally explodes. This isn't just the turning point of the season, it's the moment where heaven's silence turns into divine fury. The temple is no longer just a place of worship, it's a battleground, and the trailer for episode 2? It's filled with tension, betrayal, and a kind of sacred violence we've never seen Jesus express like this before. The line between devotion and rebellion is about to be crossed, and not everyone's ready for what comes next. Section 1, The Calm Before the Storm. Episode 1 left us right on the edge of something massive. We ended with Jesus in complete silence, weaving together the whip that will soon tear through the chaos in the temple courts. There was no music, no dialogue, just the sound of fibers tightening and the quiet observation of John, watching from a distance. That stillness wasn't just for dramatic effect, it was the kind of calm that comes before an earthquake. And now, episode 2 promises to deliver the tremor that shakes everything loose. What started with a parade into Jerusalem is about to spiral into confrontation. The trailer for episode 2 shows quick flashes, coins flying, tables falling, people screaming, but what really stands out is the look on Jesus' face. It's not anger in the way we understand it, it's heartbreak channeled into righteous fury. And before that whip ever strikes, the episode builds the tension in masterful ways. The trailers and teasers reveal quiet conversations that feel like loaded weapons. Thomas and Kofnney are seen exchanging words that seem harmless at first, but they carry an undercurrent of accusation. We're watching seeds of conflict being planted in the soil of misunderstanding. Kofnney's role in this season seems to be shaping up as a sort of religious agitator. He's not just attacking Jesus with words, he's weaponizing confusion, stirring up fear and cloaking it in piety. Thomas, who we know struggles with doubt and hesitation, is placed in a situation that will likely test not just his faith, but his loyalty. And then there's Yusuf. His storyline continues to be one of secret sacrifice. We saw in episode 1 how he tried to move through the city unnoticed, changing his clothes, blending into crowds, and slipping into places where he could observe rather than act. But that's the thing about watching in silence. Eventually, you either have to speak or you vanish. Episode 2's trailer hints that Yusuf is getting closer to that moment. He sees things. He writes things down, but how long can he stay invisible before someone notices what he's doing? Meanwhile, the political tension between Caiaphas and Pilate hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, it's growing worse. The more popular Jesus becomes, the more Caiaphas feels like control is slipping through his fingers. In episode 1, we saw how Pilate mocks Caiaphas subtly but cruelly about his inability to control the people. That mockery isn't just about pride, it's about power. And Caiaphas knows that if he doesn't stop Jesus soon, Pilate might decide to remove the high priest and place someone more cooperative in his position. So now, Caiaphas isn't just fighting against a prophet, he's fighting for his own survival. This is why the cleansing of the temple is such a breaking point. To the Romans, it will look like a riot. To the Pharisees, it will look like an attack on their authority. And to the merchants, it's bad for business. Jesus isn't just flipping over tables, he's flipping over systems, traditions, economies, and structures that have been in place for generations. The moment his whip cracks through the temple air, it's more than a protest, it's a declaration of war, but not the kind of war they expect. Not violence for the sake of control. This is a holy confrontation, a divine protest. And while all this is brewing, Judas is watching everything with a look that should terrify us. He came to Jerusalem expecting glory. He saw the palm branches and thought the revolution had begun. But now he sees Jesus walking away from public praise, sending away his mother, destroying the very instruments of power Judas hoped to use. And in that space, something in him begins to harden. The trailers don't show much of Judas, but that silence speaks volumes. Because the most dangerous thoughts are the ones we keep to ourselves. In the background of all of this is the Watcher. He's still taking notes, still observing, but now he's starting to appear in more and more scenes, watching conversations, watching confrontations. There's something unsettling about the way he sees things. He notices things others don't, moments that seem insignificant but carry great meaning. And if you caught it, there's a glimpse of him in the temple crowd. He's there, right when the tables are flying, still watching, still writing. As if he already knows what this moment means for history. This episode won't be quiet, it won't be subtle, but it will be deeply personal. Every character is carrying something heavy: guilt, confusion, expectation, Fear in episode 2 forces them all to lay those burdens down at the feet of a man they barely understand. Jesus is no longer speaking in riddles, his actions are loud, his pain is visible, his mission is unstoppable. And while we might know where the story goes next, episode 2 makes us feel what it's like to stand right there in the moment, when everything wholly feels like it's about to come undone. One of the most quietly devastating moments in episode 1 that sets up the emotional foundation for episode 2 is Jesus telling Zebedee to take his mother, Mary, and the other women back to Bethany. On the surface, it's a simple instruction, but underneath that request is a wave of sorrow and foresight that most of the disciples still haven't grasped. Jesus knows what's coming. The whip isn't the only thing being prepared. His heart is being prepared too for the unimaginable pain that's just around the corner. And in that preparation, there's a need to protect the ones he loves the most. Let's take a moment to sit with that. Why does Jesus send Mary away? Because he doesn't want her to witness the brutal details of what's to come. He wants to shield her. It's the same instinct any son would have. But this isn't just any son, this is the Son of God preparing to lay down his life, and even in that divine mission, the human part of him aches for his mother. We know from scripture that she will eventually stand at the foot of the cross, but here, in this scene, Jesus is still clinging to a small moment of delay, a small chance to give her peace before everything breaks apart. And it's not just about her pain, it's about his, too. Imagine knowing that your mother will see you suffer and die. Imagine carrying the weight of the world's sin and, at the same time, the heartbreak of knowing that your mother's heart will be shattered watching it. That's the level of emotional layering The Chosen is so good at portraying. It's not just theology, it's love and loss and choice. That's why when Jesus tells Zebedee to take the women to Bethany, it's not a command, it's a plea. And you can feel that tension, the tug between the divine mission and the human cost. What makes this even more powerful is the way Mary responds. She doesn't protest. She doesn't make a scene, but you can see the sorrow in her eyes, the knowing. If anyone understands what Jesus is about to endure, it's her. From the very beginning, from the angel's announcement to the manger in Bethlehem, she's been walking this road with him, and now, as the journey reaches its most painful chapter, she's asked to step back, not because she isn't strong, but because Jesus still wants to give her a moment of safety before the storm. And then there's the other Mary, Mary Magdalene. She feels the shift, too, in episode 1. She was one of the few who could read the pain in Jesus' eyes during the triumphal entry. While others were cheering and celebrating, she was watching him closely, noticing that he wasn't really present. In that moment, that's the kind of emotional sensitivity that keeps surfacing in her character. And it's why Jesus' words about the R don't go over her head like they do with the others. She hears him, really hears him. That theme of selective understanding, of some being able to perceive while others miss it entirely, is something that continues to grow stronger in episode 2. As Jesus sends the women away, it also signals a turning point in the story. Up until now, there have always been moments of comfort, meals shared, jokes made, moments of peace, laughter, even rest. But once the women leave, it's like the light dims. The support system he's known all this time begins to dissolve, piece by piece. It's not abandonment, it's preparation. The cross isn't just about the nails and the wood, it's about isolation. About being alone when no one else can walk with you, and episode 2 leans into that loneliness with quiet, painful precision. At the same time, we're also watching the reactions of the disciples to this decision. Some of them are confused, others are just going along with it. But John is beginning to understand. He's been watching Jesus from a distance. He saw him prepare the whip, he saw the way he looked when the crowds cheered, and now he sees him sending Mary away. Each step is like a breadcrumb leading to something terrible but also something holy. John's understanding will become central as the story continues. His role as the disciple Jesus loved isn't just about affection, it's about perspective. He's seeing things the others aren't ready to face. There's also something symbolic about Bethany itself. It's been a place of refuge for Jesus, especially with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. So when he sends his mother there, he's sending her to safety, to friends, to peace. Even that choice is layered with care. It's not just about removing her from danger, it's about placing her in a space where she will be surrounded by love in the coming days of darkness. This isn't a cold farewell. It's the most tender kind of protection a man could offer his mother, wrapped in divine sorrow. But here's the irony. Even though Jesus sends her away, we know she will be back. The pain of separation is temporary. Her return at the cross will be one of the most emotionally powerful moments in Scripture. And The Chosen is clearly setting that up. By showing us this moment of goodbye, they're setting the emotional stakes sky high. When Mary returns, it won't just be a scene, it will be a reckoning, a fulfillment of pain, and a witness to the ultimate sacrifice. So as we move into episode 2, remember this: every action Jesus takes is layered. Every instruction is filled with purpose, and even when it looks like he's pushing people away, it's because he loves them more than they can understand. This isn't just storytelling, it's sacred history brought to life, and it's preparing us for a storm like no other. Every season of The Chosen has introduced a character who isn't quite a villain in the traditional sense, but whose presence is unsettling. This time, it's Kofnney. From the moment he appears, there's something slippery about him. He's not loud, he doesn't shout his opposition like some of the Pharisees. Instead, he whispers. He nudges, he stirs doubt while pretending to be devoted. That makes him even more dangerous. Because men like Kofnney don't need swords, they use suspicion like poison. And they do it in the name of righteousness. In episode 1, we saw Kofnney and his group enter Jerusalem with quiet intensity. No announcements, no bold declarations, just hushed conversations, strategic observations, and the spreading of subtle lies. They called Jesus a false prophet, not with fire and fury, but with calm authority that feels terrifying in its confidence. These are not men looking for truth. These are men looking to stop it from spreading, and in episode 2, that mission gets sharper, more deliberate, and far more personal. The trailer hints at a confrontation between Kofnney and Thomas. And it's the kind of scene that doesn't need violence to be devastating. You can feel the danger in the silence between their words. Thomas, known for his thoughtful nature and cautious heart, is walking into a conversation with a man who already knows how to press his doubts. That's what Kofnney does. He watches, he learns, and then he strikes not with anger, but with calculated manipulation. Think about it, what makes someone like Kofnney so threatening isn't just what he says, but when he says it. He waits until people are vulnerable, until things are uncertain. And then he injects just enough fear to tip the balance. He's not trying to convince Thomas with facts. He's trying to unravel him with suggestion. What if Jesus is dangerous? What if he's misleading people? What if he's inviting Rome's wrath upon everyone? That's the kind of seed Kofnney plants, one that grows in the dark, and it doesn't stop with Thomas. His influence spreads like a shadow. Merchants, townspeople, even a few of the temple leaders. We can feel the shift. Suddenly, the people who once waved palm branches are now whispering doubts. That's the power of fear when it wears a religious mask. And Kofnney wears that mask well. What The Chosen does so brilliantly is show how evil doesn't always come with horns and flames. Sometimes it walks in quietly, holding a scroll, quoting scripture, pretending to care. Kofnney's entire persona is built on the idea that he's the one trying to protect people. But his protection is poison. He protects tradition at the expense of truth. He guards control, not compassion. And that's why his presence in episode 2 is so crucial. He represents everything Jesus came to confront. We've already seen how Jesus handles hypocrisy. He doesn't avoid it. He doesn't tiptoe around it. He confronts it directly. That's what's about to happen in the temple. But before the whip cracks, Kofnney is working behind the scenes, shaping the crowd's perception. He's not trying to defeat Jesus in open debate. He's trying to make Jesus look like the enemy without ever swinging a sword. And here's where it gets chilling. Kofnney's calm demeanor makes him believable. He doesn't raise suspicion because he doesn't. He acts like a zealot. He acts like a teacher, a concerned voice in a world of chaos. But what he's actually doing is preparing the city to reject the very one sent to save them. And he's doing it with a smile. This is why his conversation with Thomas is so pivotal. Because Thomas is someone we know has struggled with faith. Before, he wants to believe, but belief has always been a battle for him. And when someone like Kofnney enters that battlefield with just the right tone, just the right question, the damage can be quiet but deep. We don't yet know exactly what Kofnney will say in that scene, but the tension is building toward a breaking point, and it's not just about Thomas. It's about the entire city. Kofnney's real goal is to turn the people against Jesus before Rome ever has to lift a finger. He's laying the groundwork for betrayal. And the brilliance of The Chosen is how they show the slow, steady corrosion of public opinion, not through dramatic speeches, but through side glances, quiet talks in alleyways, and words that linger in people's ears long after they walk away. And don't forget, Judas is watching this too. While Kofnney spreads his poison, Judas is absorbing it. He may not realize it yet, but every seed of doubt, every act of destruction that Jesus performs, every moment that doesn't align with his idea of what the Messiah should be, those things are starting to pile up in his heart, and Kofnney's whispers only make them heavier. It's no coincidence that this episode is setting up betrayal, not just the cleansing of the temple. Because what's more dramatic than a public scene of overturned tables and fleeing merchants, a quiet betrayal that begins in a whisper? Kofnney represents that whisper, and it's growing louder by the second. This is why episode 2 is more than just the action episode. It's the spiritual pivot point. It's the moment when the crowd begins to turn, when allies begin to question, when enemies start to Smile, Kofnney is the match, and we're all standing in a room filled with dry kindling. By the time Jesus enters the temple, it won't be just a physical cleansing. It will be a spiritual explosion, a response to the poison that's been building. And Kofnney? He'll be in the crowd, notebook in hand, watching the fire spread. In a season full of confrontations, power struggles, and emotional weight, there's one presence that speaks louder without saying a single word: the Watcher. We first met him back in the Lazarus resurrection scene, a shadowy figure at the edge of miracles. And now, in season 5, he's becoming more than just background noise. He's here, he's watching, he's writing, but the question that keeps getting louder is why. Episode 1 gave us our clearest view of him yet. He isn't just lurking. He's deeply engaged, following disciples, observing Jesus, scribbling furiously into that small notebook of his. It's unsettling, not because he's doing anything explicitly evil, but because we don't know which side he's on, and that's exactly what makes him so captivating. He's neutral for now, but in a story where neutrality eventually becomes betrayal, his silence is beginning to scream. We watched him witness scenes that no one else did. Yusuf changing his garments, Kofnney and his band slipping into the city, Jesus preparing the whip in silence. Somehow, the Watcher is everywhere yet no one confronts him. That's the genius of how the Chosen builds suspense around him. He isn't hidden, but he isn't explained either, and in a world full of loud voices, he becomes the one character we can't ignore simply because of how quietly he moves. In episode 2, we're expecting his presence to escalate. He appears in the temple. He sees the moment the tables turn, literally. He sees Jesus in one of his most confrontational moments. But the way the Chosen frames these scenes suggests that the Watcher isn't just seeing what's happening, he understands what it means. That's an important difference. While others see a man flipping tables, the Watcher might be seeing a fulfillment of prophecy, while the merchants shouting confusion. The Watcher might be recognizing a divine pattern. Now, here's the question no one can stop asking: who is he? There are theories. Of course, some fans believe he's an angel. Others think he's a future disciple, a historian, a secret Roman spy. Some believe he's someone we already know from scripture, whose role hasn't fully unfolded yet. But one thing's certain: the Chosen is keeping his identity hidden for a reason. This isn't just some random extra. His notebook isn't just a prop. He's collecting moments, preserving truths, and as the stakes rise, so does the urgency in his behavior. There's something about the way he records what he sees that feels sacred but also unsettling. Like he's keeping track of history in real time, but not as a fan. Not even necessarily as a believer, more like a scribe. Someone who's been tasked with documenting divine moments that the world might try to erase. That's what gives him weight. He's not just watching, he's witnessing, and witness accounts, those can change everything. There's a brief moment in the trailer for episode 2 where we see him among the temple crowds. He's not reacting like everyone else. While merchants panic and Pharisees rage, he remains still. That stillness? That's important, because when chaos breaks out, the ones who stay still often see the truth more clearly than anyone else. And that moment suggests the Watcher understands what Jesus is doing. Not just the action, but the meaning behind it. What if he knows this is the turning point? What if he realizes that from this moment forward, there's no going back, that the city has made its decision, and the countdown to the cross has officially begun? That possibility makes his presence even more haunting, because if he understands what's happening, then everything he's writing down has eternal weight. He's not just chronicling events, he's recording a spiritual war. And that begs another question: who is he writing for? Himself, his people, Rome, heaven? That small book of his might be the most important object we've seen all season. Not because of what's inside it now, but because of what it could become: a gospel, a betrayal, a final record before the world turns dark. We don't know. And that's exactly why the Chosen keeps showing him, because even if he says nothing, we're all listening to what he's not saying. There's a possibility that the Watcher's identity will change how we see all of season 5. What if in the final episodes, we realize he's someone we should have recognized all along? What if his silence was actually a sign of reverence or maybe guilt? The fact that the Chosen keeps him hovering around key moments, but never directly involved, keeps us on edge. He's not missing anything, and yet he's still holding back. In this episode, especially during the temple cleansing, that tension comes to the surface. He watches Jesus take righteous anger and make it holy. He watches the whip swing and tables fall. But more than that, he watches the people, how they react, how they retreat, how they process what they've just seen. His eyes aren't just on Jesus, they're on everyone. That notebook of his is collecting more than quotes. It's collecting judgment. If Jesus represents divine truth, then the Watcher represents human response. He's documenting whether we understood, whether we obeyed, whether we repented or walked away. That's what makes him such a powerful symbol. He doesn't say anything, but his very presence forces us to ask, if I had been there, would I have understood? And maybe that's the question this entire season is asking. This isn't just about flipping tables. When most people hear Jesus cleanse the temple, they picture chaos, animals running wild, coins flying, merchants screaming, a whip cracking through the air, and yes, those things happen. But the Chosen doesn't treat this scene like a burst of divine temper. It treats it like a holy reckoning, a calculated confrontation, a final warning before judgment falls. The whip Jesus prepared in silence at the end of episode 1, it's not a weapon of rage, it's a symbol of heartbreak, and in episode 2, it becomes the sound of a holy line being drawn in the sand. Let's go back to where this starts, not in the temple courts, but in Jesus' soul. All season long, we've seen him carrying a heaviness that no one else truly understands. During the triumphal entry, while the crowds were shouting and waving palm branches, Jesus wasn't smiling. His heart was breaking. Not because the people were cheering, but because they didn't understand what they were cheering for. And now, in the temple, that sorrow boils over into action. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it had been building for years. Every trip to the temple, every time he saw merchants selling animals, money changers cheating the poor, and religious leaders pretending it was all normal, each moment added pressure. And now, as he walks into the courts with whip in hand, the dam finally bursts. The temple was supposed to be a place of prayer, a house of intimacy between God and his people. But by the time Jesus steps in, it's become something else, a market, a business, a machine. People are being robbed in the name of righteousness. Poor families are being overcharged for sacrifices they can barely afford. Widows are being ignored while merchants profit, and the high priests, they're silent. Or worse, complicit. That's why this moment matters so much. Jesus isn't just angry, he's grieving. Grieving a system that's lost its soul. Grieving a city that doesn't recognize what's standing right in front of it. And as he steps into the chaos, he doesn't just see tables, he sees generations of injustice. And he decides no more. The trailer for episode 2 shows flashes of this moment, the whip flying through the air, animals fleeing, shocked faces turning toward the man they just welcomed as king. But the Chosen knows better than to focus only on the action. It focuses on the emotion, the tension in Jesus' shoulders, the way his face shifts between sadness and strength. The moment before he acts, when it's clear he's not lashing out, he's making a statement, a declaration. The system is broken and heaven has had enough. And here's what's so important. Jesus doesn't start with destruction, he starts with warning. He speaks first. We don't have the full script yet, but based on scripture, we know he'll say something like, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." That isn't just a rebuke, it's an accusation, and not just toward the merchants, but toward the leaders who allowed this to happen under their watch. He's holding everyone accountable. It's easy to imagine the confusion. Some bystanders might cheer, others might be horrified. The Pharisees? They're likely furious, offended that someone would dare challenge the temple order so publicly. But in Jesus' eyes, the temple stopped being holy the moment it stopped being humble. This is his Father's house, and he's not letting it go without a fight. Now let's talk about what this means symbolically. The cleansing of the temple isn't just a historical moment, it's prophetic in scripture. It's a foreshadowing of what Jesus is about to do on a much larger scale. Just as he clears out the corruption from the temple, he's about to clear sin from the world through his own sacrifice. The whip, the fury, the overturning of tables, they're all previews of the judgment he will take upon himself. It's not just a cleansing, it's a warning. A glimpse into what justice looks like when holiness steps into the mess. And yet, through all the noise and shock, there's also mercy. Jesus doesn't strike people. He drives out the animals, he knocks over the tools of corruption, but he still offers space for repentance. That's what makes this scene so powerful. It's not driven by hatred, it's driven by heartbreak. He's saying, you still have time, you can still turn back. But he knows they won't, he knows what's coming. And that's what makes this episode so heavy. We also need to notice who's watching. The watcher, of course, is there, taking it all in, but so is Judas. And this moment, this exact moment, is the turning point for him. Up until now, Judas has been struggling silently, wondering why Jesus doesn't use his popularity for political power, why he doesn't capitalize on momentum, why he doesn't step into glory. And now, after seeing Jesus destroy the very structures Judas believes in, something breaks. Judas doesn't say anything yet, but his silence is no longer neutral. It's dangerous, and he's not alone. Others in the crowd are beginning to shift, too. This isn't the Messiah they expected. This isn't the peaceful teacher or the miracle worker. This is someone who's come to tear down everything they thought was untouchable, and for many, that's too much. They wanted revival. What they got was revolution, not against Rome but against the rot within their own religion. As episode 2 builds to this crescendo, The cleansing of the temple becomes the heart of the storm, and like any storm, it leaves people shaken, scattered, and searching for meaning. Jesus walks in as a teacher. He walks out as a threat. Not because he changed, but because the truth always feels like a threat to those protecting a lie. It didn't start with 30 silver coins. It didn't start in the garden with a kiss. Judas's betrayal began here in the temple episode. 2 of the Chosen doesn't just show Jesus flipping tables, it shows Judas flipping inside. Something shifts in him during this episode, something irreversible. We've always known where this story ends, but this is where the descent truly begins, not with violence, but with disappointment. Up until now, Judas has been following Jesus with a kind of nervous optimism. He believes in the mission, or at least in what he thinks the mission is supposed to be. He saw the potential in Jesus' charisma, crowds, influence, a man who could change the world, reshape Israel's future, take the throne David once held. But Judas's version of Messiah is political, it's profitable. It's rooted in glory and recognition. And now, all of that is slipping through his fingers. When Jesus storms the temple and tears down the systems of trade and transaction, Judas isn't just shocked, he's angry, not openly, not yet. But deep down, something inside him fractures. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jesus was supposed to win hearts, not burn bridges. He was supposed to seize influence, not destroy it. Watching the coins scatter across the ground, Judas doesn't just see money being lost, he sees opportunity vanishing. The dream he had? It's unraveling right in front of him. And here's the thing, Judas isn't evil, not in the way we usually think. He doesn't want Jesus dead, he wants Jesus different. He wants Jesus to be the version of the Messiah that fits his expectations. But that's the danger of discipleship based on control. When the teacher stops aligning with your vision, betrayal becomes an option, not because you hate him, but because you no longer trust him. The temple cleansing scene in episode 2 is shot with that tension in mind. Jesus is acting with divine authority, fulfilling prophecy, reclaiming holiness, but Judas is standing there wondering what just happened. He's not seeing the big picture, he's seeing disorder, he's seeing risk, and worst of all, he's seeing a man who refuses to be managed. There's a moment subtle but devastating when Judas watches Jesus from the edge of the crowd. He doesn't say a word, he doesn't need to, his face says everything: confusion, frustration, disbelief. It's the look of a man who no longer understands who he's following. And that is perhaps the most dangerous place a disciple can be, not in disagreement, but in disillusionment. Disillusionment doesn't scream, it whispers. It builds slowly, and that's exactly what's happening in Judas's heart. He's not ready to betray Jesus yet, but he's ready to consider alternatives. That's the seed, that's the beginning. And it's planted right here in the temple courtyard. Among the overturned tables and scattered coins, the Chosen does something brilliant here. It doesn't rush Judas's downfall, it lets it simmer, it lets us see his humanity, and in doing so, it forces us to ask the uncomfortable question: would I have felt the same? Would I have walked away when things didn't go according to my plan? Would I have given up when Jesus didn't do what I wanted? Because Judas isn't some foreign monster. He's a mirror, a reflection of every moment we've wanted to shape Jesus in our image rather than be shaped in his, and that's why his descent is so haunting. It's slow, it's internal, and it feels so real. What's even more chilling is the possibility that Kofnney's words are ringing in Judas's ears. Maybe he overheard something, maybe he started listening, maybe the whispers of the watcher didn't just observe him, they affected him. It's never one big decision that leads to betrayal. It's 1,000 small ones, 100 hesitations, dozens of justifications. Judas isn't jumping into sin, he's sliding into it, 1 inch at a time. An episode to makes that slide painfully visible, he walks away from the temple with more questions than answers, with more bitterness than belief. He doesn't confront Jesus. He doesn't ask for clarification. He just lets the distance grow. That's the danger. The silence between them is no longer filled with trust, it's filled with suspicion. We're not at the betrayal yet, but we're close. And the Chosen knows exactly how to build that suspense, not by showing Judas making a deal with Caiaphas, but by showing him making a decision in his heart. A decision to stop following with his whole self, a decision to pull back just a little. A decision to protect his version of the truth, even if it means rejecting the real one. And in doing that, he begins the journey toward the most infamous kiss in human history. What makes this so powerful is that Judas doesn't even realize how far he's drifting. He still believes he's doing what's best, he still thinks he can guide the situation. Maybe even force Jesus to act, but that's not faith. That's manipulation wearing a spiritual mask, and it always ends in tragedy. So when episode 2 ends, we're left with this haunting image: Judas watching from a distance, not gone, not yet, but slipping. The heartbreak is that Jesus sees it too, he knows. And he lets it happen not because he doesn't care, but because love doesn't force. even when it's headed for betrayal. This is how The Chosen builds true suspense, not with jump scares or violence, but with the slow unraveling of a soul, and we're watching it happen in real time. When Jesus left the temple that day, he didn't just leave behind a mess of broken tables and scattered coins, he left behind a city in shock. The cleansing of the temple wasn't a passing moment. It was a bomb dropped in the middle of Jerusalem, and the echoes are everywhere, in the silence of the stunned merchants, in the fury of the Pharisees, in the whispers of the crowd. Everyone is trying to make sense of what just happened. But there's one thing no one can deny: nothing will ever be the same again. This was not just a symbolic act, it was a political disruption, an economic disruption, a spiritual disruption, and in the tense days leading up to Passover, it sent a ripple effect through every corner of Jerusalem. The temple authorities? They're furious but also afraid. Because Jesus didn't just challenge their rules, he challenged their authority in the most public place possible, right in the heart of their domain. And worse, he did it with the confidence of someone who knew he was right. Pharisees and Sadducees, who were once divided in theology, now have a common problem: Jesus. Caiaphas, the high priest, doesn't need to debate anymore. He doesn't need to convince people in back rooms that Jesus is dangerous now. He just points to the temple ruins and says, look, the evidence is right there in the chaos. And The Chosen uses this moment to signal a shift. From this point forward, the opposition is no longer hidden, it's aggressive, coordinated, ready to act, and Pilate, he's watching too. Though the Romans didn't witness the cleansing firsthand, word spreads fast, especially when riots are involved. Rome doesn't care about theology, but it cares about order. And anyone who can stir this kind of disturbance, especially during a religious festival, that already puts the city on edge, is a threat, not just to Jewish leaders, but to Roman peace. Pilate doesn't need to believe in Jesus' message to see the danger in his popularity. This is where things begin to tighten. The news around Jesus' ministry gets shorter. Every step he takes now will be monitored. Every conversation he has could be twisted. The cleansing of the temple didn't just trigger a theological debate, it triggered surveillance, plots, traps. The Chosen makes it clear from this point on, Jesus isn't walking through a city. He's walking through a minefield. The people, meanwhile, are split. Some are amazed, others are afraid. The same crowd that laid down palm branches days ago is now confused. This isn't the king they expected. Where's the diplomacy? Where's the strategy? Jesus just declared war on the temple system, and whether the crowd admits it or not, many of them benefited from that system, the convenience, the tradition, the appearance of righteousness without the inconvenience of sacrifice. But Jesus didn't come for appearances, he came for the heart. And episode 2 reveals how many hearts aren't ready for that level of disruption. The deeper question isn't just what did Jesus do, it's what will we do now that he's done it. That question haunts the city, and it haunts the viewers. Because real change always demands a response. One of the most subtle but powerful moments in this aftermath is the conversation among the disciples. They're rattled, some are inspired, others are confused. They've seen Jesus confront Pharisees before, but this was different. This wasn't words, this was fire, controlled, yes, righteous. Yes, but still fire. Some of them are scared, not just for Jesus, but for themselves. Because if this is what he's willing to do to the temple, what happens next? It's Peter who probably voices what many are feeling. His loyalty is fierce, but his fear is rising. He's seen the momentum, he knows the cost. And though he'll never admit it yet, there's a seed of dread starting to grow. They're not walking into revival, they're walking into a storm. A confrontation with religious and political forces that will not back down, and Peter, the rock, is beginning to feel the weight of what that rock will be used for. John, on the other hand, remains more silent, observant. We've seen his sensitivity, his ability to see beyond the surface. And here, he's not just seeing what Jesus did, he's seeing why. The lambs walked through the eastern gate, the prophecy is unfolding, and while others panic, John is connecting the dots. He doesn't have all the answers, but he knows deep down this is exactly what was always meant to happen. And yet, amidst all of this tension, one detail adds an extra layer of suspense. The temple leaders don't act immediately. They don't arrest Jesus right then and there. Why? Because of the people, because of fear. Because they know that, despite the chaos, Jesus still holds influence. That tension between hatred and hesitation is the kind of suspense The Chosen handles with precision. The city is holding its breath, waiting to see what Jesus will do next and what his enemies are willing to risk. The cleansing of the temple was the match. But what follows is the kindling, the strategy, the build-up. And you can feel it in the air. Jesus has just crossed a line, not a mistake, not a misstep. A divine line. And there's no going back. This is where the story changes, not in a dramatic betrayal scene, Not on a cross, but here, in the space between a whip and a whisper. The aftermath isn't loud. It's strategic. It's quiet rooms and plotting. Eyes, it's disciples questioning. It's Judas drifting. It's religious leaders sharpening their knives metaphorically and soon, literally. And at the center of it all, Jesus walks away from the temple not as a criminal, not yet, but as a man who just declared himself the true high priest. Without saying the words, he made the claim, "This house belongs to my Father, and I will not let it be profaned." That's why this moment is so dangerous. Because it wasn't just defiance, it was declaration, and the entire city heard it. Something changed after the temple was cleansed, not just in the city, not just in the temple, but in the people closest to Jesus. There's a new tension, thick, heavy, unspoken. And it doesn't come from the Pharisees or even Pilate, it comes from his own disciples, because now, the one they follow so closely suddenly feels far away. Not because he's hiding from them, but because the weight he carries is becoming unbearable, and no one else can carry it with him. This is one of the most haunting things The Chosen captures in episode 2, the growing distance between Jesus and everyone else, and not because he's changed. He's the same man who healed the leper, wept with Mary, laughed with children, and raised Lazarus. But the hour is approaching. The weight of the mission is pressing down, and he knows no one else truly understands what's coming. Not yet. Not fully. Even his closest friends begin to sense something they can't name. Mary Magdalene, John, and his mother can feel the sorrow behind his silence, but even they don't have the full picture. It's like walking beside someone on a road, and you slowly realize they're heading toward a place only they can go. You can't stop them. You can't follow, you can only watch. After the temple cleansing, Jesus doesn't bask in victory. He doesn't rally the crowd, he retreats, but not out of fear, out of purpose. The more hostile the city becomes, the more he withdraws, not because he's avoiding confrontation, but because he's preparing for the greatest confrontation of all, the cross. And this quiet, deliberate distance he places between himself and the world, that's where the real suspense is born. The disciples notice it, but they don't know what to do with it. Peter, bold and impulsive, tries to close the gap. Maybe he asks more questions. Maybe he tries to lighten the mood, but Jesus isn't pushing them away. He's simply moving forward into something they're not ready for, that kind of holy solitude is terrifying because it's not coldness, it's focus, a divine, unshakable determination that doesn't allow for distraction. John senses it the most. The disciple whom Jesus loved has always been sensitive to the shifts in Jesus' spirit, and now he sees the change. He watches Jesus' face, listens to his quiet moments alone, hears his prayers under his breath. He knows this isn't just another mission. This is the mission, the final leg of the journey. And John can't shake the feeling that they're running out of time. The suspense here isn't built through action, it's built through stillness. Through glances that last a second too long, through silence where there used to be words. Through Jesus waking up earlier, praying longer, spending more time alone. These are the things The Chosen weaves into its storytelling with such skill. It's not what Jesus says, it's what he doesn't say anymore. The jokes are less frequent. The smiles more rare. The burden is closing in, and that silence isn't just emotional. It's strategic. Because Jesus knows what's about to unfold. He knows who is watching, who is plotting, who is doubting. He knows Judas's heart is turning, even if Judas doesn't. He knows Pilate is calculating. He knows Caiaphas is preparing. And he knows the crowd's cheers are about to turn into shouts of "Crucify him." The most powerful scenes in The Chosen are often the quiet ones, and in episode 2, that quiet becomes thunderous. You can feel it in the way Jesus lingers in prayer, in the way he looks at the city, knowing its fate, in the way he touches the walls of the temple one last time, not in victory, but in mourning. He's not just flipping tables anymore, he's saying goodbye. What makes this even more gut-wrenching is the way the disciples react or don't react. They're trying to hold on to something that's slipping through their fingers. Not because Jesus is abandoning them, but because they're not ready for the pain that's coming. And deep down, they know it's coming, but what can they do? Say stay, say don't go to the cross. They've already tried that, and he already said no. Mary, his mother, watches with a pain that words can't touch. She sees the shadows in his eyes. She remembers the prophecy, a sword will pierce your soul. She knows that time is getting close, but like Jesus, she stays silent. Because sometimes the most powerful act of love is walking beside someone who's suffering, even when you can't save them from it. This is the suspense The Chosen is building, not with enemies, but with silence. Not with betrayal, but with the weight of love. Jesus isn't rushing toward the cross. He's walking slowly, deliberately, with every step filled with sorrow and strength. And we, as viewers, feel the tension mount, not because we don't know what's coming, but because we do. The temple cleansing was the flashpoint. But the silence afterward, that's the storm's eye, the eerie calm before everything breaks. And the Chosen lets us sit in that stillness, not to make us comfortable but to prepare us, because what's coming next will shatter everything. As the dust settles over the temple and whispers of rebellion circulate through Jerusalem, two of the most powerful men in the city find themselves backed into corners, different corners, but still cornered. Caiaphas, the high priest, Pilate, the Roman governor, two men from different worlds with different agendas, who now find themselves face to face with the same problem, Jesus of Nazareth. Episode 2 of The Chosen doesn't just move the plot forward through miracles or teaching, it moves through tension, political, spiritual, personal. And nowhere is that tension more pronounced than in the uneasy glances exchanged behind palace walls. Because Jesus' actions in the temple weren't just a disruption, they were a declaration. And both Caiaphas and Pilate felt the ground beneath them shift. Let's start with Caiaphas. For him, Jesus has always been a theological inconvenience. A wandering preacher stirring the people, challenging the traditions, breaking Sabbath rules, forgiving sins. But the temple, that was sacred ground, that was his domain. And when Jesus stormed through it with a whip, overturning tables and shaming the entire system, Caiaphas didn't just see a preacher gone rogue, he saw war. The Chosen portrays Caiaphas as a man obsessed with order. But that obsession isn't rooted in righteousness, it's rooted in survival. He's under pressure from every side, from the people, from the Sanhedrin, from Rome, and now from Jesus. And the worst part? The people still love Jesus. That's the real threat. Because power can tolerate rebellion until it becomes popular. Caiaphas can't act without Pilate. He doesn't have the authority to execute. So now he's forced to do something he hates: negotiate, convince, partner with Rome, the very institution he claims to loathe. And in this way, The Chosen brilliantly shows how desperation leads to compromise. Caiaphas, the spiritual leader of Israel, begins aligning himself with the empire that oppresses his people, all to silence one man. Now shift your focus to Pilate. Unlike Caiaphas, Pilate isn't driven by faith or prophecy, he's driven by politics, by control, by the fragile peace he's tasked with keeping. And when rumors reach him about a Galilean who just turned the holiest place in Jerusalem into a riot scene, that's not theology, that's a problem. Pilate doesn't understand the significance of the temple, but he understands unrest. He knows Passover season is already tense, crowds, national pride, whispers of Messiah. That's a dangerous mix, and Jesus, whether he intends to or not, is fueling the flame. For Pilate, Jesus isn't a false prophet, he's a possible spark for rebellion, and rebellion brings Roman blood, which brings consequences from Caesar, which puts Pilate's head on the line. So what does Pilate do? He watches, he listens, he gathers intelligence, he asks questions, not to understand Jesus spiritually, but to assess the risk. And what The Chosen does so well here is show the difference in how both men perceive Jesus. To Caiaphas, he's a blasphemer. To Pilate, he's a wild card. But to both, he's dangerous. The brilliance of this episode lies in its subtlety. It doesn't rush the alliance between Caiaphas and Pilate, it lets it fester, build. You can feel it in their conversation, short, clipped, political. Pilate doesn't want to be involved in Jewish religious affairs, but if it keeps the peace, he'll listen. Caiaphas doesn't trust Rome, but if it gets the job done, he'll bend. This is where the suspense multiplies. Because Jesus hasn't even directly confronted Pilate yet, but the path is being laid. Caiaphas will try to corner Jesus with theology, Pilate will try to weigh him with strategy. And both will fail to understand who they're dealing with. Jesus isn't just a man, he's a storm walking, and neither throne, temple, or empire is strong enough to contain him. There's also something tragic unfolding here, because neither Caiaphas nor Pilate is purely evil. They're both men trying to protect their systems, their people, their power, but in doing so, they're about to reject the very one who came to save them. That's the heartbreak of it. Jesus isn't their enemy, he's their rescue, but fear blinds them. Pride silences them. And politics buries the truth. As episode 2 progresses, we begin to see the scaffolding of betrayal take shape, the backroom conversations, the weighing of public opinion, the careful wordplay. Caiaphas and Pilate are both building cases, not with facts, but with fear, and soon they'll find themselves not just reacting to Jesus but united against him. The Chosen wants us to see this alliance for what it is. Not a collaboration of strength, but a compromise of conscience. Two men who should never agree on anything, suddenly nodding to each other because Jesus forced them to choose. And instead of choosing truth, they choose self-preservation, and so the storm gets darker. Not because of violence, but because of silence, because in their palaces and courts, the decision is being made, not yet publicly, not yet officially, but in the heart. Jesus must be stopped. And neither of them realizes that's exactly what he came to do. She's been here before, watching from a distance, listening without speaking. Feeling something deeper than fear settle in her chest, Mary, the mother of Jesus, has seen his ministry unfold from the very beginning, from angelic proclamations to whispered rumors, from water into wine to raising the dead. But what she feels now in episode 2, it's not wonder, it's not pride, it's sorrow. Not the kind that explodes in wailing, but the kind that sits heavy in silence, because Mary knows the hour has come. The chosen doesn't need her to say much. That's the power of her presence. Her silence is its own language. When Jesus walked into the temple with a whip, Mary's eyes didn't widen in shock, they softened. As if she had already expected this, maybe not the details, but the moment, the shift. The feeling that her son had just crossed an invisible line and would never come back the same. She remembers what Simeon told her in the temple all those years ago. A sword will pierce your soul too. At the time, she couldn't fully understand it, but now the sword isn't metaphor, it's real. And every step Jesus takes toward the cross, she feels that sword twist just a little deeper. What the chosen does masterfully is show us how. Her pain isn't loud, it's reverent, a mother who loves her son more than life. Watching him willingly walk into death and not stop him, not beg, not bargain, because she knows this was always his path, and as much as it breaks her, she refuses to look away while the disciples argue about what just happened in the temple. While Caiaphas and Pilate plan their next moves, while the people whisper and worry, Mary simply watches. She sees the heaviness in Jesus' shoulders. She notices the longer moments he spends alone. She recognizes the tension behind his smile. These are things only a mother sees, and only a mother can feel in her bones. Episode 2 lets us sit with her in these quiet, heartbreaking moments. There's a scene not dramatic, not showy, where Mary watches Jesus from afar as he speaks to someone. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't move. She just watches, and in that watching, there's a silent prayer being said. Not for his safety, but for strength. For him to have what he needs to finish what he started. That's the unbearable part of her faith. She believes in what he's doing. She knows this is necessary, but it doesn't make it easier. She's not mourning for herself, she's mourning for the world, for the blindness of the leaders, for the pain Jesus is carrying alone. Because she understands what no one else really can. He's not just her son. He's the lamb, and like every lamb brought into the city for sacrifice, he's being led quietly, willingly to the altar. But he's not just being sacrificed for a family or a nation. He's being sacrificed for humanity, and Mary sees it all unfolding, slowly, unstoppably. There's something else happening, to something that the chosen subtly captures. Mary is preparing, not for a battle, not for an escape, but for a goodbye. She doesn't know the exact moment it will come, but she knows it's close, and so she begins to treasure these moments even more. The sound of his voice, the way he walks, the way he looks at her, not as a child looks at his mother, but as a savior looks at his beloved creation. It's in those glances that the real heartbreak lives. Because Jesus knows she knows. They don't talk about it, they don't need to. There's a quiet between them that's full of mutual understanding, and pain, and love, and acceptance. That's what makes Mary's role so powerful, not just in the gospel story, but in the chosen's interpretation. She isn't just a witness to the suffering, she becomes a symbol of holy surrender. We often talk about Jesus' obedience to the Father, but what about Mary's obedience to the Son? She could scream at him to stop, she could beg him to turn back, but she doesn't. Instead, she remains steady, faithful, devoted. A model of endurance in the face of unthinkable grief, and yet, she's still human. Her tears are real, her heartache is raw, and behind her calm eyes is a storm raging. What mother could watch this unfold and not break? And maybe that's why Jesus sends her away in this part of the story. Not to shield her out of weakness, but to honor her strength. To give her space to grieve, to rest, to be what she's always been, his most loyal witness. Jesus tells Zebedee to take his mother, Mary Magdalene, and a few others back to Bethany. It's not rejection, it's protection, but it's also prophetic. Because even though Mary will return at the cross, Jesus knows that for this part of the journey, he must walk alone, and he can't bear the thought of her seeing what comes next. Not yet. Still, we know she will. We know she'll stand at the foot of the cross. We know she'll hear his final breath, and we know that she won't look away. Because Mary's strength doesn't come from denial, it comes from love, love that chooses to stay, to weep, to believe, even in the face of death. That's what makes this episode so deeply moving. The temple may have been cleansed, the powers may be scheming, but in the background, a mother is silently preparing her heart to watch the world crucify her son, and she's doing it with faith stronger than steel. This isn't just suspense. This is sacred ground. He doesn't speak, he doesn't intervene, he simply watches. But in episode 2 of The Chosen, that silence begins to feel louder than words. The Watcher, the mysterious figure with the notebook, continues to follow Jesus, the disciples, and now the growing chaos in Jerusalem, and the more we see him, the more unsettling his presence becomes. Not because he's aggressive or dangerous, but because he sees everything. Who is he really? That question lingers in the back of every viewer's mind. In the previous episode, his role was almost like a whisper appearing at Lazarus's resurrection, scribbling in his notebook, silently following from the fringes, but now, he's a shadow growing longer, watching Judas, watching the temple, watching Jesus, watching us. It's like he's been assigned to record it all, but for what purpose? Episode. To deepen the mystery around him, he's not just observing anymore, he's positioning himself. He's near enough to overhear conversations no one else notices. Near enough to catch Yusuf's disguise and Kofnney's recruitment of his gang. Near enough to see Judas's expressions of conflict and confusion after the temple is turned upside down, but he never reacts, he just writes. What's so intriguing is that the Chosen doesn't treat him like a threat, not directly. No ominous music, no slow-motion close-ups, just quiet focus. And somehow, that's more unnerving. Because the characters don't seem to notice him or they dismiss him quickly, but we don't. We know he's important, we just don't know why yet. There's a brilliance in how the show integrates the Watcher's point of view into the narrative. Occasionally, we're shown events through his eyes, but it's not like a camera, it's emotional. Observant, like someone studying the world with painful clarity, and through his gaze, we're reminded that this story isn't just unfolding. For those in it, it's being recorded, measured, remembered. What adds even more tension is how the Chosen frames his movements. He's never too far from Judas, not always directly behind him, but always in the periphery. Watching Judas's shifts in behavior, watching his reactions to Jesus. Watching his decisions, small at first, but increasingly consequential. It's almost as if the Watcher knows Judas is the hinge on which this entire story will turn. Could he be connected to the authorities, to the temple, to Rome, or is he working independently, serving a higher or perhaps darker purpose? The ambiguity is deliberate, and that's what makes the suspense unbearable. Because whatever he's writing down in that notebook, it matters. It might be the very document that condemns or defends what's to come, and there's more. Episode 2 subtly reveals that the Watcher isn't just following Jesus's public moments. He's present during more intimate ones. He sees Jesus preparing the whip, he observes from rooftops, alleyways, shadows. He's not just watching the signs, he's watching the signs behind the signs. The emotional tremors, the spiritual tension. The shift in the atmosphere. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Watcher doesn't seem to enjoy what he's witnessing. He's not smug, he's not gleeful. He's solemn, almost burdened. Like someone who didn't choose this role but accepted it anyway, and the more we see him, the more we wonder, is he there to destroy Jesus's mission, or to ensure it's fulfilled? There's one particular moment that stands out. Judas leaves the temple clearly disturbed, his thoughts are spiraling. He lingers near the edge of a crowded street, watching Jesus from a distance. And just beyond him stands the Watcher, silent, observing both of them, writing something down. He's not just an outsider now, he's connected to the internal unraveling. And maybe that's what makes him so compelling. He isn't a villain in the traditional sense. He's something else, an agent of revelation. Someone who sees what others don't, records what others forget, a reminder that this story, while playing out in real time, is also echoing through eternity. It's not just happening. It's being witnessed. The Chosen uses his presence to blur the line between history and judgment. Between memory and accountability. He might be a scribe, a spy, an angel, a historian. We don't know yet, but every time the camera lands on him, we're reminded someone is keeping track of every word, every action, every heart, and that creates a deeper level of suspense. Because if the Watcher knows what's coming, does he ever feel tempted to intervene? Or is his silence part of something bigger, something divine? What if he's not here to stop anything? What if he's here to make sure everything happens exactly as it must, in the world of the Chosen, where tension is built not just through conflict but through meaning? The Watcher becomes one of the most enigmatic pieces on the board, and his presence casts a long, quiet shadow over every conversation, every decision, every tear. He doesn't speak, but he says so much. There's a stillness hanging over Jesus now, not the stillness of peace, but of inevitability, and if you've been paying attention in episode 2 of The Chosen, you can feel it too. Every interaction between Jesus and his disciples carries the weight of something unsaid, something looming. These aren't just normal conversations anymore. These are last words, final teachings, subtle goodbyes, and the tension is almost unbearable. Because no one really knows what to say, but everyone feels that something is coming. After the temple cleansing, everything shifts. The disciples are no longer joking the way they used to. The camaraderie is still there, but it's strained. Like a group of friends trying to hold on to the last bit of joy before the storm hits, and Jesus, ever intentional, doesn't waste a single moment. He knows their time together is growing short. So every parable, every word of encouragement, every question he answers, it's all part of his preparation for them and for us. The genius of The Chosen is how it captures this holy tension. Without needing grand declarations, there's no dramatic music, no long speeches, just Jesus doing what he's always done, teaching, listening, loving, but under all of it, there's a farewell happening. One that only he fully understands. One moment stands out among the rest: Jesus and John. The disciple whom Jesus loved. John doesn't ask much, he never does. But he watches more than anyone, and when he speaks, it's from a place of deep spiritual sensitivity. There's a scene in this episode where John simply looks at Jesus and says, "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" He doesn't mean physically, he means spiritually, emotionally, eternally, and Jesus, instead of answering directly, places a hand on John's shoulder and smiles, not with joy but with love and sorrow. That's how Jesus speaks now. Not with explanations, but with presence, a glance that holds 1,000 truths, a touch that says, "I'm with you now, but I won't always be." He's preparing them, little by little, for a reality they can't fully grasp yet, and it's breaking his heart too, because he loves them, and letting go of them, of Peter, John, Mary, Thomas, and even Judas, hurts more than we can imagine. Peter, on the other hand, is restless. Always the bold one, the protector, the one who speaks when everyone else is silent, but even he is starting to falter. He's watching Jesus pull away emotionally, and he doesn't understand it. In one scene, Peter tries to make light of the situation, maybe a joke, maybe a proud declaration that they'll fight with Jesus no matter what comes, and Jesus just looks at him, not with disappointment, but with compassion, as if to say, "I know you want to protect me, but soon I'll be protecting you in a way you don't expect." The pressure is building, you can feel it, and The Chosen leans into that pressure, not with action, but with silence. With spaces between words, with long pauses, with conversations that start and never finish. Because no one really knows what to say when time is running out. All they know is that something has shifted, and none of them are ready. Then there's Thomas, the practical one, the thinker. He's always the one who asks, "But how?" And this time, he's quieter than usual. Maybe he's starting to feel like all the logic in the world can't explain what Jesus is doing. And when he sees the look on Jesus's face after the temple incident, it scares him. Not because Jesus is angry, but because Jesus is resolved. And that's a different kind of terrifying. The kind that says, it's too late to turn back now. Even the younger disciples are feeling it. Andrew, nervous and unsure. Matthew, calculating and watching. They've seen the crowds, the power, the miracles, but this feels different. Like they've reached the edge of something sacred and dangerous. And Jesus is about to step into it alone. And Judas is perhaps the most troubling presence of all. He's still here. Still following, still nodding and smiling, but his eyes are elsewhere. You can tell he's thinking too much, feeling too much, questioning everything. The temple cleansing wasn't what he wanted. He wanted revolution, glory, a kingdom of gold and influence, and now he sees a king who overturns tables and walks away in silence. That's not the Messiah he signed up for, and Jesus knows this. You can see it in the way he looks at Judas, not with hatred, not even with disappointment, but with pain, deep pain, because he loves Judas, and that love, even now, is unchanged. That's one of the most powerful truths this episode reminds us of. Jesus never stops loving Judas, even as he prepares to be betrayed by him. It's in these quiet moments, these small, intentional interactions, that The Chosen builds the emotional core of episode 2. The suspense isn't in chases or fights. It's in a cup shared at dinner, in a whispered prayer, in a lingering glance. Because these aren't just friends anymore, they're about to become witnesses to suffering, to sacrifice, to salvation. And the weight of that calling is pressing in on them, slowly, unrelentingly. They can feel the air changing, the city watching, the future tightening like a net, and in the middle of it all, Jesus remains calm. Not because he's unaffected, but because he's committed. Every step, every word, every moment is leading to the cross, and he won't turn away. The beauty and sorrow of this section is that Jesus isn't trying to escape what's coming. He's embracing it, and that, more than anything else, is what stuns the disciples into silence. He knows what's about to happen, and he's still going forward. There's a storm brewing, and it's not in the sky, it's behind Judas's eyes. In The Chosen Season 5, Episode 2, Judas is the quietest character, but also the loudest in terms of tension. Every movement, every glance, every word he hears but does not respond to is filled with weight. Because Judas is no longer just following Jesus, he's evaluating him, judging him, measuring him against the image he once had in his mind. And that image is starting to crack. The temple cleansing wasn't just a bold move from Jesus, it was a betrayal of Judas's expectations. Judas didn't join this mission to see tables flipped and animals freed. He wanted influence, legacy, a throne. Like many others, Judas expected a Messiah who would reclaim Israel's power, not rebuke its practices. And now that Jesus has made it clear he's not here to play politics or chase popularity, Judas is left with one haunting question: what am I still doing here? We see it in his posture. The way he stands just slightly away from the group, the way he looks over his shoulder more than forward, the way he stares at Jesus not with admiration, but with calculation. Judas is slipping, not all at once, but like a foundation crumbling brick by brick. Doubt is seeping in, and when doubt mixes with pride and fear, betrayal isn't far behind. One of the most haunting things The Chosen does in episode 2 is show Judas not as a monster but as a man. A man who truly did believe, a man who wanted to follow, but a man who couldn't let go of his own version of the story. And that's what makes his fall so terrifying. It doesn't come from hatred. It comes from disillusionment. There's a scene where Judas overhears a conversation between some disciples about the future, what's next, what Jesus might do, what the end goal is. The others speak with trust, even if they don't understand, but Judas, he doesn't say a word. He listens, and when no one's watching, he walks away. That's the moment you realize he's no longer walking with them, he's walking away from them. His loyalty isn't gone yet, but it's unraveling, and Jesus knows. That's perhaps the most heart-wrenching piece of all. Jesus knows. He sees it in Judas's eyes, the questions, the confusion, the temptation to help move things along. Jesus knows Judas's heart better than Judas does. And still he says nothing to stop him, not because he's resigned, but because the story must unfold, and Judas is part of that story. The Chosen doesn't make Judas evil, it makes him real. That's the horror. Because if Judas was just a villain, we could distance ourselves from him, but instead, we see pieces of ourselves in him, our pride, our expectations, our frustration when God doesn't do what we thought he would, and suddenly, Judas isn't just a man in scripture, he's a mirror. He's watching Jesus closely now. Not with love, but with suspicion. He's noting the things Jesus doesn't say, the people he doesn't confront, the thrones he doesn't claim, and somewhere deep down, Judas starts to believe something dangerous. Maybe Jesus needs a little push, maybe he just won't act unless someone forces his hand. That's where the seed of betrayal begins, not in rebellion, but in rationalization. Judas convinces himself that handing Jesus over won't destroy him, it will accelerate him. That if Jesus is really who he says he is, then being arrested will be the spark that ignites the revolution, and if he's not, well, Judas doesn't want to consider that possibility yet. There's a moment in the episode, brief but unforgettable, where Jesus looks straight at Judas. And for just a second, everything goes quiet. No words are exchanged. No one else notices. But Judas feels it, that gaze, that knowing, that sorrow. It rattles him, because in that moment, Judas isn't sure if he's seen or exposed. And he is, completely. The tension here is suffocating. Judas is a man standing on the edge of a cliff and no one sees it. The others are distracted, busy, praying, laughing, questioning, but Judas, he's isolated. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally. And it's in that isolation that the enemy begins to whisper. Not all betrayals happen in the dark of night. Some happen in plain daylight. In the middle of a crowd, with smiles and nods, Judas is still going through the motions, still eating with them, still walking beside them, still speaking with kindness, but his heart is drifting fast. The Chosen does something bold here. It invites us into Judas's inner world. We're not just watching his actions, we're feeling his pull, the way his mind twists justifications, the way he tells himself he's doing the right thing, the way he looks for signs that he's not alone in his doubt and finds none. That isolation, that silence, becomes the breeding ground for betrayal. And what's more chilling, Judas still loves Jesus, in his own broken, misaligned, worldly way he does. But love without trust is poison. By the end of the episode, we know something has shifted forever. Judas has not made his move yet, but the moment is coming, and when it does, it won't be with rage or hatred, it will be with a kiss. There's a strange shift happening in the air, not just among the disciples, or in the palaces of Caiaphas and Pilate, but among the people themselves. The crowd, the city, Jerusalem, the beating heart of the Jewish world, is beginning to tremble, and not because of earthquakes or signs in the sky, but because the people can feel it. Something is about to happen, and that feeling spreads like wildfire. Episode 2 of The Chosen doesn't just focus on the central characters, it zooms out. Lets us listen in on the background voices, the merchants, the travelers, the pilgrims flooding into Jerusalem for Passover. And you can hear it in their tone: suspicion, uncertainty, excitement, confusion. Just a few days ago, these same streets were echoing with shouts of Hosanna. As Jesus entered the city, palms were waved, robes were laid down, the crowd adored him. But now, the mood is changing. That's the most haunting part about the crowd. They're fickle, easily swayed. One moment they'll crown you king, and the next, they'll cry for your crucifixion. And the Chosen wants us to see this shift for what it truly is, a spiritual war playing out through the voices of men, because behind every whisper, there's something darker at work. And as Jesus quietly prepares for what's coming, the enemy prepares to using the hearts of the people. The cleansing of the temple ignited the spark. It shook the city. Merchants were furious. Temple guards were humiliated, and while some bystanders were inspired, others were terrified. This wasn't the kind of Messiah they had imagined. They wanted a liberator, a conqueror. Someone to overthrow Rome, not flip over tables and walk away. And so, the murmurs begin. He went too far. Is he even safe? That's not what the Messiah is supposed to do. It spreads from the streets to the homes, from the markets to the temple steps. And soon, the same crowd that welcomed Jesus is now questioning him. The Chosen captures this unease beautifully, not with massive protests, but with the slow creep of doubt. It's not a roar. It's a rustle, and it's growing louder. Meanwhile, Jesus walks through this storm of voices in complete awareness. He hears the whispers, he sees the glances, and still, he doesn't flinch. Because he knows the nature of the crowd. He's seen it before in Galilee. They chased him for miracles. In Decapolis, they begged him to stay. But here in Jerusalem, their hearts are different, harder, not entirely, but dangerously close. And that's why this moment is so important. Jesus isn't just confronting injustice, he's confronting the expectations of a nation. You see it in the faces of those closest to him. They notice the change, too. Matthew, the ever-calculating one, sees the numbers shifting, fewer followers, more skeptics, less joy, more fear. And Peter, always the fighter, starts to clench his fists more often. The tension gets under his skin because Peter doesn't like watching Jesus get misunderstood. But what can he do when the crowd's heart begins to turn? Even the children in the street sense something is wrong. A scene shows a group playing with wooden swords mimicking a king riding into battle. They cheer, they shout, they pretend, but when they see Jesus walking by quietly, with sorrow in his eyes, they stop. One of them says, "That's not how kings look." And just like that, even the innocence of children becomes a mirror to the misunderstanding of the masses. The episode then takes us into the marketplace, where Kofnney and his group are making noise. Not just literal noise, but noise in the hearts of the people. They call Jesus a disruptor, a threat, a false prophet. And while many roll their eyes at Kofnney's drama, others start to wonder what if he's right. And this is where it gets dangerous, not because the majority is fully convinced, but because their indecision makes them vulnerable to lies, to pressure, to fear. That's what turns a crowd into a mob, not certainty, but uncertainty mixed with manipulation. The Pharisees see this too, and they seize it. They see the doubt beginning to fester in the streets, and they start to feed it, carefully. Strategically, they don't need to change everyone's minds. They just need enough of the crowd to hesitate, because a hesitant crowd doesn't resist injustice, it watches it unfold. And Jesus, he doesn't try to fix it, not with speeches, not with miracles. He lets it happen because he knows this is the cost of obedience. The same crowd that cheered will soon choose Barabbas, and he accepts that, not with bitterness, but with resolve. Because the truth has never been determined by majority vote, and salvation was never meant to be popular. There's one more layer to this tension, the spiritual one. The Chosen doesn't spell it out, but you can feel it. The enemy is circling. The atmosphere is shifting. Demonic influence is whispering in ears, stirring hearts, shadowing the city. Not in the form of monsters or special effects, but in fear of change, fear of surrender. Fear that maybe this Jesus isn't who they hoped he would be, and fear makes people dangerous. Episode 2 wants us to sit with that, to feel it, the heartbreak of a crowd slowly turning its back, not because it knows what it's doing, but because it doesn't want to know. And that's what makes the suspense so sharp, because we, as the audience, know what's coming. And we want to scream, "Don't listen to them, don't let go of him," but the crowd doesn't hear. Not yet. This isn't just about fear anymore. This is about control. And Caiaphas feels it slipping through his fingers. In episode 2 of The Chosen, the spotlight doesn't just stay on the disciples or the crowds, it tightens its focus on the religious authorities. And in this episode, we finally begin to see the inner unraveling of Caiaphas, the high priest. The man who once stood calm and calculated is now pacing, frustrated, watching his carefully built world begin to shake, not because of an army or a rebellion, but because of one man who refuses to play by the rules, Jesus. It's here that the true plan begins to take shape. Caiaphas, surrounded by those who echo his fear and ambition, begins setting the trap. He's no longer content with surveillance, no longer satisfied with minor interrogations. Jesus has become a threat not just to temple order but to the very foundation of Caiaphas' identity. And when your power is rooted in fear and performance, nothing is more dangerous than a savior who sets people free. That's what The Chosen portrays so brilliantly. Caiaphas doesn't hate Jesus because he's done anything unlawful. He hates him because Jesus exposes the truth. He unmasks the systems that serve pride instead of people. He confronts the performances, the hypocrisy, the empty rituals, and Caiaphas can feel the people noticing. What once would have been brushed off as rumors or minor disturbances is now headline news in Jerusalem. Everyone's talking about Jesus, and not in the way Caiaphas can control. The temple has been disturbed, the system has been insulted, and if Caiaphas doesn't act fast, he risks losing everything. So he begins whispering strategies with other priests, secret meetings, half-truths shared behind closed doors. He doesn't yet have Judas, but he doesn't need him right away. He just needs momentum, a reason, a witness, and most importantly, an opportunity. Pilate remains a key figure, hovering over the situation like a predator waiting for the excuse to strike. The Roman governor doesn't care about temple rules or religious disputes. What he cares about is peace, stability, and if Jesus threatens either, then Jesus becomes Rome's problem too. Caiaphas knows this, and he plans to exploit it. We see a crucial conversation in this episode, one that starts polite but ends icy. Caiaphas and Pilate, two men in power, both aware of how fragile their influence really is. Pilate mocks Caiaphas, pretending to be amused by the chaos in the temple. But there's an edge in his voice, a warning. He's watching, and he won't tolerate an uprising. Caiaphas, ever the tactician, plays along, but you can see the gears turning in his mind. He now understands what must happen. Jesus must not simply be arrested. He must be discredited, silenced, eliminated, not just for the sake of the temple but for the survival of the fragile alliance between religious authority and Roman occupation. And so the snare begins to close. Meanwhile, Jesus doesn't resist, and that's what drives Caiaphas mad. Every attempt to provoke him fails. Every trap falls flat. Jesus doesn't fight back. He doesn't organize a defense.